Hello and welcome to the Skydival channel, and today let's go over the best and worst gaming CPUs to get in early 2026. It is not a good time to buy a graphics card, and it is certainly not a good time to buy memory. However, I checked up on CPU prices, and right now they are at the lowest they have ever been since Black Friday of last year, which just goes to show how slow CPUs are moving on the DIY PC market. So if you needed a CPU upgrade either for your current PC or for a brand new one, then my goal by the end of this video is to tell you guys what are my favorite CPUs I'd recommend looking at and which ones I would still stay away from. Now, you may think this is going to be a super overcomplicated subject and you're not going to know which CPU is going to be right for you, but fortunately, I've got the help on my website, cpus.gg, which is going to dilute a lot of this information down into a simple website, which, to be honest, if you just wanted to stop watching this video and just play around on this website, you are more than welcome to. It's in the description down below. You can play around with how many cores or threads you want your CPU to be, what sort of certain work tags or gaming tags you want your CPU to fulfill, as well as what socket and what brand and the price. So feel free to play around with cpus.gg if you want. Otherwise, I'm just going to run through my favorite picks on this website and hopefully, like I said, find you guys the right CPU. So we're going to go ahead and start with the best budget CPUs, or my favorite at least. I'm going to go ahead and set the price slider to just above $200. 210 seems about right. Anything under 200 is about budget. Click on show me and like this video. You didn't see that coming, did you? That's the price of admission for watching this video. I'm sorry, you gotta do it. Feel free to quickly drop a like. So here's what I've gotten. Actually, I've got a few in the mid-range that showed up that are actually just above 200 bucks, including this one, which we're definitely going to talk about in the video. But otherwise, let's go ahead and talk about some budget CPUs you probably want to avoid. What is not pictured in here is the Ryzen 5 7600. You don't want to get that CPU. There are plenty of other CPUs that are better than it, that are faster than it, and are cheaper than it, while achieving the same performance. One of those, of course, being the 7500F, which is exactly the same CPU, just without integrated graphics, and that's not a downside because the integrated graphics of the 7600 would be supplemented with a discrete graphics card either way if you're going to use NVIDIA, AMD, or Intel Arc. Otherwise, if you look here in the budget category and you scroll down, I have these ranked by like how much I rate them in general. So the top row here are pretty good. Otherwise, everything below it, not so much, or at least what I wouldn't recommend for a new system. So other than the 7600X, I do have the old AMD Ryzen 5000 CPUs down here, including the 5500 X3D, which did just come out. That is an option, but I would only recommend it for those of you who are already on an AM4 based gaming PC. So if you look at the name of your CPU that's in your motherboard and it has a 5 in front of it, that is the last generation that was on the AMD AM4 socket. And as a result, there are not that many CPU upgrades beyond your probably Ryzen 5000 or 3000 CPU. So the best of the best will have to be this 5500 X3D. So if you're already on an old Ryzen 2000, 3000, or 5000 CPU, then that's worth looking at the 5500 X3D because that is going to give you that 3D V cache for the cheapest amount of money. However, I would like to note the 5800 X3D is coming back this year soon in a limited production. And you definitely want to stay tuned if you want to get a full-blown X3D CPU that will be the last of its kind on that old AM4 socket. But otherwise, I would not look at building a new PC with a Ryzen 5000 CPU because your upgrade options are quite limited. The same more or less applies with the Intel Core i3, i5, and i7 series found on the LGA 1700 socket. So that goes for like the 12400F right here, the 12600KF. I wouldn't really look at those CPUs unless you're able to stick with DDR4 memory. But to get straight to the point, those are the ones I'm just iffy about. I'm not a super huge fan of. These CPUs I'm about to cover next are ones that I definitely recommend if you're building a brand new gaming PC with a budget motherboard, budget CPU, budget DDR5 RAM, so on and so forth. So the Intel Core Ultra 225F is okay. It is the entry-level LGA 1851 socket CPU available on Intel Arrow Lake. It has 6 cores, 10 threads. It's okay. I believe its performance is about the same as the 12600KF that is right next to it, but do note that these first generation Intel Core Ultra CPUs are, what's a good word I'm looking for? Hilariously slow? No, it's not funny. It's sad. It's sad to see Intel drop to this level when they release these CPUs. And yeah, these first generation Intel Core Ultra CPUs, I wouldn't really look at them unless they're for a crazy cheap price, which even right now, these are. Like the 225F, you can find one here on walmart.com if you're in the United States for, I think, okay, not $227, but, you know, 157 or 167. Oh yeah, 146. That ain't bad, but if you want my honest opinion, you're going to want to go with Ryzen if you're going to build a budget system in 2026. So between the 9600X and the 7500F for my favorite budget gaming CPU, I'm going to have to give it to the 7500F. 6 cores, 12 threads on the AM5 socket, unbeatable value. It is basically a Ryzen 5 7600 without integrated graphics, but with a substantial $40 discount. Now, is the 9600X slightly faster? Yeah, but is it, at least here in the United States, $60 faster? Nope. And actually that extra $60 you save could go towards more memory, more storage, a better graphics card. It is much more worth it because, again, if you're looking at improving the gaming performance of your PC, you're always going to want to reinvest that into the graphics card. That will always yield you the most performance per dollar versus upgrading your CPU. Also, why I recommend AMD over, say, Intel in this segment is the socket, because the AM5 socket is still going to be supported into 2027 and beyond with the 10,000 series of Ryzen CPUs or even 11,000, and there are going to be a lot of excellent CPU upgrade options after this 7500F. Whether you want to jump to a 9800X3D or whatever 10,000 series has to offer, you are on the AM4 socket, so you're on something that can support long-term upgradability, which is a great thing to see, and it all starts at $127. This CPU was used a ton in many of my PC build guides last year and the year before. It is just the king of budget CPUs, and I would not look any other way. Sure, you have the 9600X, but I've seen it go down to $150 on Black Friday, and right now it's $182. So it's still overpriced for what it is. Not a bad CPU by any means, just if I had to pick one between the two right now, 7500F. So that is my favorite budget CPU. Look no farther than that. However, again, if you are already on the AM4 socket and you needed an upgrade, consider the 5500X3D for $210. Or if you're on the old Intel LGA 1700 socket with a Core i5 or i3 processor, could look at getting a 12600KF to upgrade from like your i3 12100F or something like that. Anyways, let's move on to the best mid-range CPUs. So we're going to hit reset. We're going to set the price slider to beginning at $210. I think that sounds about right. Yep. And then we'll go ahead and set this down to below or just at $300. And there are a lot of CPU options in this segment. So taking a look, I can see the subscribe to Scatterable button first thing, actually right here on the webpage. I think we want to click on it. I'm going to go ahead and do it because I haven't done it all yet already. And yeah. Okay, there we go. Now we can see the mid-range CPUs. Right, so you've got a lot of options, like I said, in this segment. Technically, the fastest CPU that is between $200 and $300 is the 7600X3D, which is why it is at the very top of the mid-range segment here on CPUs.gg. But would I actually recommend that for a new system? Not quite. Or even if you're a gamer, not quite. But otherwise, let me highlight some CPUs I think you should avoid in the mid-range. Spoiler alert, some of them start with Intel, but not all of them. Like I said in the budget segment, if you're looking at a first generation Intel Core Ultra CPU, so anything that's like a 265K or 245K, 235, those again are just pitifully slow. Just that first generation of Intel Core Ultra, when it came out, it was slower. than the previous generation, 14th generation and 13th generation CPUs on the old LGA 1700 socket. I won't get too much into it. If I haven't yet already, there's some benchmarks shown on screen. I would only consider these older Intel Core Ultra CPUs if they are on a steep discount. And right now, even as is, they're not worth it. And they're even more not worth it when you look at the fact that Intel just came out actually with some new Arrow Lake refreshed CPUs, those being the 250K Plus and the 270K Plus. And those, at least in this segment, are going to be containing the 250K Plus, which runs at $210. Let's price check that. Yeah, $210. If you don't know what the new Arrow Lake refreshed CPUs are, let me give you a quick breather. These are some new refreshed CPUs that are on the same LGA 1851 socket as all of those first generation Intel Core Ultra CPUs I was just talking about. However, Intel absolutely stepped it up with these new Arrow Lake refreshed CPUs. The 250K Plus, as a matter of fact, for its price, is probably the best bang for your buck, from $200 to $300, which is part of the reason why, if we reset this, it is my favorite CPU of the month, or really of early 2026. This CPU right here has 18 cores, 24 threads, which is an improvement on the previous Intel Core Ultra 5 CPUs that were first generation. And Intel did some additional tuning and L3 cache improvements that just gave this CPU a bit more horsepower underneath the hood. And as it stands, it's beating AMD at their own game. If you want to talk about FPS per dollar, the 250K Plus is a better value for gaming than the 9700X, than the 9600X, or any other CPU in between there that isn't X3D. So this really is a truly fantastic CPU, and arguably, I would say it is my favorite mid-range CPU. There's just one drawback. Once again, this is on the LGA 1851 socket, which is going to be discontinued after this CPU comes out. I know it's stupid. That is the only drawback, because this is it. The only other CPU that's going to be faster than this is the 270K Plus. Intel is not going to be making any additional CPUs on this socket because it's going to be replaced by LGA 1954, I think. Once again, which just goes to show Intel on this next generation they're going to be coming out with, LGA 1954, has to support more than 3 generations of CPUs. Intel has done this for maybe at least over a decade of having only 2 CPU generations supported on their socket, and it really hampers, well, other than, LGA 1700, that was 3 generations, but they really need to do an AMD. They need to support at least 3 or 4 long-term CPU generations on their next socket. Otherwise, this is it. This is the max. You're not going to be able to upgrade from this. And when it comes to investing in a CPU platform, you want to get something where you can keep the motherboard and keep the RAM for a long period of time. And when you do want to upgrade your CPU, you don't need to buy a whole new motherboard or even a whole new set of RAM. You just buy a new CPU. And if you get this and you want to upgrade from it, you're going to have to rip out the motherboard and the RAM. That is the only major con with the 250K Plus. Otherwise, it is an excellent value on paper. So if you didn't want to go through that hassle of having to rip out your motherboard, maybe get a whole new kit of RAM, maybe 4 or 5 years from now on a new CPU socket, and you just wanted to stay on the same CPU platform but get a better CPU a few years down the road, this is what I would recommend instead. I would recommend the Ryzen 7 7700. Let me cook. So this right now is hanging out at about, I think, on Newegg, at least here in the United States, $212, which is strikingly affordable, although this doesn't come with a CPU cooler, but you get an aftermarket one either way. And on Amazon, and I think worldwide, you can find 7700s for still quite reasonable prices. The reason why I really like the 7700 is that in comparison to the other mid-range CPUs featured around it, the 7700X is barely faster, but consumes a lot more power to get that just extra bit of performance over the regular 7700, yet it retails for about $25 to $30 more. It is not worth it in my opinion. Additionally, the 9700X, it's actually a bit faster than what it was at launch. However, it is hovering around $300, and I've seen the 9700X go down to as low as, I believe, $260 or $50 during Black Friday, so this CPU can certainly get cheaper. And really, the only CPU that's going to beat the Ryzen 5 7700 in terms of price to performance, this one right here, is going to have to be the 250K Plus that I was just describing. Yet, on the AM5 platform from the 7700, you can upgrade to Ryzen 9000 with an X3D CPU, or the upcoming 10000, or if there's an 11000 series of CPUs. You have much more CPU upgradability, and this at the end of the day is an 8-core 16-threaded CPU. So for just about $30 more than that 9600X you were just looking at in the previous section of this video, you can get an additional 2 cores and 4 threads while getting a little bit more performance, which is better in my opinion. So the Ryzen 7700 would have to be my favorite mid-range CPU right now if you're looking at building a brand new PC on a new motherboard with a new socket, new motherboard, all that jazz. However, if you already have an AMD Ryzen system with an AM5 CPU and you're looking for an upgrade in this mid-range segment, you could go for the 7700, but let me show you one other CPU. You can get a Ryzen 5 7600X3D at retail for $240 at least here in the United States. This CPU was previously locked to just Micro Center stores only. However, you can now get it on Amazon, at least here in the United States. So if you're on a 7500F, and I guess for whatever reason you wanted to upgrade to an X3D CPU, but on a budget, you've got the 7600 X3D here for $240, which just about maybe is the only CPU I'd push for you to get. Otherwise, if you go with something that isn't X3D, like a 9700X in this price range, you're not going to get the most bang for your buck. I would just stick it to an X3D. But with all that said, I want to finish out on one more thing, and I did mention this in the previous segment of this video. Once again, AMD is bringing back the Ryzen 5 5800 X3D. So if you're on an older AMD Ryzen system with an AM4 socket, and you want to upgrade from that Ryzen 5 5600, 5500, 3500X, 3600, 2600, even a 1000 series CPU, AMD is bringing back the top of the line, top SKU, best performing AM4 CPU that came out, I think, 2 years ago that they discontinued, back for a limited run. I don't know what the price is. I don't know when it's coming out. If I had to guess, it's going to be released around Computex, which is happening next month in late May. But that is something I would definitely look at, because I know plenty of you who are watching this video are still on the old AM4 socket, and you are maybe hesitating to buy a whole new motherboard and whole new set of RAM to upgrade to AM5 or Intel Core Ultra. And as you can tell, memory right now is really expensive, but you don't have to do any of that if you can get your hands on that 5800 X3D. And I think the price point for it is going to be in this mid-range. It's probably going to be closer to $300. Hopefully, if AMD aren't too greedy, but regardless, I want to put that out there. That's a really big announcement. A lot of you who are watching this video should know about. That is an AMD CPU upgrade worth considering if you don't want to get a whole new motherboard instead of RAM. Anyways, that's pretty much it. 250K plus, excellent CPU. If you don't want to upgrade your CPU at all, that's a fine pick. If you do want to upgrade your CPU though, I would look at the 7700. That's really great FPS per dollar. And just about stay away from any Intel Core Ultra first generation CPU. So the 265K, 265F, 235, 245K. I guess if you're on the LGA 1700 socket still and you wanted the top end CPU you can get on that socket, you could look at the 14600KF, but it is very expensive right now. It is $290. I don't think it's worth going from, say, your 12600K or your 12400 to this for an additional $290. I would much rather put that money towards a faster graphics card or anything else, really. So with the mid-range covered, we're gonna go ahead and finish out with the best high-end CPUs. So here we have my favorite high-end CPUs, and spoiler alert, you're going to want to exclusively consider AMD. And this is because AMD are the kings of L3 cache in this high-end CPU segment. Every single one of these CPUs that end in X3D come with at minimum 96 megabytes of L3 cache. And in gaming, you will see noticeable improvements in quite a few games over regular CPUs with regular amounts of L3 cache. And the reason why I point this out is because Intel in this segment, like with the 285K, These CPUs without any reasonable amounts of L3 cache to compete with X3D can just not do it. They're not even close. The only exception I'll give is actually to the brand new 270K Plus, because while this doesn't have a lot of L3 cache to compete with X3D, it is very competitive in terms of its pricing, because this here, for example, is $350, whereas a 9850 X3D, the top dog, is just below $500, and this is still going to get quite a good amount of FPS compared to this, especially in GPU limited scenarios at higher resolutions, which is most likely what you're going to be gearing for if you're getting a high-end CPU. So you're probably going to game at 1440p, 4K, or anything high-end like that. Anyways, point is to say, don't consider Intel in this high-end segment whatsoever unless you want to save a buck and get the 270K Plus, which I might as well give it its props right now. So basically, the 270K Plus is a better 285K. It's better than this, which is pretty funny to say. It actually has the same amount of cores and threads, 24 cores, 24 threads. And again, if we check out pricing, it's staying at MSRP, $350. Now, if you wanted to build a high-end gaming PC and you didn't have the funds to afford an expensive X3D CPU, like the 9850 X3D, 9800 X3D, 9950 X3D, so on and so forth, but you wanted something that will be faster than the 9900X, and the 9950X, these CPUs right here, you actually want to consider this, even for things outside of gaming. Because note, one huge improvement with these Arrow Lake refresh CPUs, including the 250K Plus, is in multi-threaded workloads. Thanks to all the cores and threads in these CPUs and all the P cores and E cores, these will outperform the 9950X and 9900X in anything tasks, workload, or editing, workstation, computational workloads, all that sort of stuff. So if you're looking for objectively, still a great gaming CPU, but a really great bang for the buck workstation workhorse CPU, the 270K Plus is worth considering. Just again, the one drawback is CPU upgradability. This is it. This will be the fastest CPU as far as we know Intel will release on the LGA 1851 socket, and in a few years from now, if you wanted to do a CPU upgrade, unless you're someone who's going to really hold it out for like 6 or 7 years, within 4 years, if you're looking for a CPU upgrade, you're going to have to buy a whole new motherboard, a whole new set of RAM, that being DDR6, and a whole new CPU. Unlike with AMD, you could do a semi-upgrade, stay on the same motherboard, stay on the same RAM kit, but get like a 10,000 or possibly even 11,000 series CPU. Again, AMD supported technically 5 generations, but realistically 4 generations of CPUs on the AM4 socket, and are still making CPUs for that socket till this day, and are even bringing back their top SKU 5800 X3D for a limited run. Intel have never done this, and they need to do this if they want to convince more DIY PC users and even pre-built users to get on their Intel platforms that use their CPUs. Intel need to show more long-term upgradability and platform support on their CPU sockets. So that is the one drawback with the 270K Plus, is its platform upgradability. Otherwise, if you have an extra $100 to spend on an X3D CPU, here are all the ones I would consider. There's also the 7800 X3D, and really, if you're looking for just a gaming CPU, don't even bother with the 9950 X3D, or even the upcoming 9950X 3D 2. Although we don't know how fast that CPU is going to be, it's not out yet. The double L3 cache will be interesting to see in benchmarks. It could actually be a crazy CPU. We don't know yet. But otherwise, right now, all you need is like a 9800 X3D or a 7800 X3D. 8 cores, 16 threads. For gaming, you don't need anything more than that. Heck, if you think you need this is what I see a lot in the comment sections of so many of these CPU videos. So many of you get like core count anxiety. You think if your CPU isn't at least 12 cores, it's gonna suck at gaming, not just gaming, but like workstation stuff. And I'm like, well, are you running this computer in a lab, or are you running it at home? If you're running it at home and you aren't working for a university, you aren't working for a high-end contractor or company that requires you to do stressful CPU computational workloads at home, which I'm telling you is probably gonna be more lenient on the GPU than CPU nowadays because of AI and 3D modeling, you really don't need that overkill of a CPU. You really don't. Like 8 cores and 16 threads is still enough for gaming and stuff on top of that. Unless you know you intentionally need 12 or 16 cores, you don't need to go that crazy in terms of core count. So once again, 7800 XTD for $380. Is that true? Let's check. Yeah, here in the United States, you can pick up a 7800 XTD for $380. That's an excellent bargain. Actually, if you want to talk FPS per dollar, that is going to be a better deal than the 9800 XTD, which right now is below MSRP, I think. $462. That is also quite significant. However, I will note during Black Friday, I believe we saw the 9800 XTD go down to $450. So it's not the all-time low price, but it is quite good, because for a long time, the 9800 XTD just was not hitting MSRP at all. It was above it, and then it came down to it, and then AMD was reluctant as hell to even consider discounting it up until like the final day of Black Friday. So don't get me wrong, the 9800 XTD, I still like it. I still recommend it. If you had an extra $80 to blow, on a CPU from the 7800 XTD to the 9800 XTD, by all means, go for it. Still a great CPU, and it is overclockable. That is one pro you'll get with these 9000 series X3D CPUs over 7000 X3D CPUs. Neither of those will bottleneck any GPU you pair them up with, even at 1440p. But I might as well also talk about the 9850 X3D, this CPU I have here on the table. This one is just a more refined 9800 X3D. In some games, this actually, I think, is worth the price increase over the 9800 X3D, the regular one, because AMD did do some tuning on the thermals, the power draw, the clock speeds across the different cores and threads on the CPU, and it can be a faster CPU while not producing any additional heat or drawing in any additional wattage, which is pretty awesome from AMD. So this isn't just going to be a more power-hungry monster that produces more heat that gives you more frame rate. It just simply gives you more frame rate over the 9800 XTD without any of those power or heat drawbacks. But for $490, is that $25 difference worth it? Possibly. If you're building a brand new system on a motherboard that is an 800 series motherboard, you'll probably need to BIOS update it to use the 9850 X3D. And for that reason alone, I would probably choose the 9800 X3D over the 9850 X3D. So note that is the one drawback with this CPU, is that you will need to BIOS update it. Sure, you can do a Q flash over a USB to update the BIOS without even having to place your CPU in the motherboard before you build your system. But not everyone who's watching this video either wants to do that or wants to try doing that. And perhaps the convenience of having a CPU that is recognized right off the bat without a BIOS update like the 9800 X3D is probably going to be a little bit more worth it. But if you want to get that flash BIOS update on your motherboard and slap in a 9850 X3D, or if you already have an AM5 CPU that can allow you to BIOS update and then place this one in there, then the 9850 X3D, I'm a fan of it. I also like it for all the reasons I just listed. Gives you more performance without additional power or heat. And I think that's it. Once again, feel free to check out cpus.gg. These are all the CPUs I talked about in this video. Once again, all those links can be found in the description down below, and hopefully this video was of worth to you. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and this is the Skyrival channel, signing out.